Imagine a forest in the American tropics at night. Not a human forest. Not a forest with campfires, villages, fields, fences, or barns. This is a world older than farming, older than cities, older than language, older than our species. Under the leaves, millions of tiny bodies are moving, leafcutter ants. One ant is carrying a piece of leaf above its head like a green sail. Another is cutting a perfect crescent from a living plant. Another is marching down into the earth, into a hidden city of chambers and tunnels. And deep inside that underground city, there is something astonishing. A farm. The ants are not eating the leaves. They are feeding them to a fungus. They cultivate it, weed it, protect it, and pass it from generation to generation. When a young queen leaves to start a new colony, she carries a little piece of the ancestral fungus in her mouth, like a sacred seed. This is agriculture, and it began around 66 million years ago, in the shadow of the asteroid impact that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. So here is our first twist. Humans did not invent domestication. We joined an ancient game. Long before a person ever milked a goat, rode a horse, buried a dog, or watched a cat stalk mice around a grain store, other species had already discovered one of evolution's strangest strategies. Do not just hunt life, manage it. Do not just consume nature, reshape it. Build an ecological partnership so tight that two species begin to change each other. And when humans finally entered this game, we did not simply tame animals. Animals changed our bodies. They changed our houses. They changed our diseases. They changed our ideas of wealth, gender, war, love, and civilization. And perhaps the most mysterious possibility of all is this: as we domesticated animals, we may also have domesticated ourselves. This is the story of domestication, the biological revolution that built the modern world. When we hear the word domestication, most of us picture a very simple story. Ancient humans, clever and ambitious, look out at the wild world and say, that animal could be useful. So they capture wolves and make dogs. They catch wild cattle and make cows. They grab wild horses and make transportation. It sounds logical. It is also misleading. Domestication is not just capture. A tiger in a cage is not domesticated. A trained elephant is not necessarily domesticated. A parrot that speaks human words is not a domesticated species. Domestication is deeper and stranger. It is an evolutionary relationship. It happens when one species begins controlling the survival, movement, diet, or reproduction of another species across generations. Over time, the managed species changes genetically and behaviorally. The domesticator changes too because the whole environment has been reorganized around this partnership. In other words, domestication is not an event. It is a long conversation between species, and the conversation usually begins without anyone knowing where it will lead. Archaeologist Melinda Zadar and other scholars often describe three broad pathways by which animals entered domestication. The first is the commensal pathway. This is the pathway of animals that came to us. They were attracted to human-made environments. Wolves came to carcass piles and camps. Wildcats came to rodents around grain stores. Pigs and chickens may have benefited from refuse in disturbed landscapes. These animals were not dragged into civilization. They found a niche beside us. The second is the prey pathway. This is the pathway of animals we hunted first, then managed. Sheep, goats, cattle, llamas. At some point, hunting wild herds became less useful than controlling them. People began protecting some animals, killing others selectively, and shaping the age and sex structure of herds. That slow shift from hunt the wild to manage the living is one of the biggest transitions in human history. The third is the directed pathway. This is later and more intentional. Humans already understood domestication, and then deliberately tried to bring animals under control for transport, traction, riding, or labor. Horses, donkeys, camels. These were not just food. They were engines. But even this three-part scheme hides the emotional power of the story, because domestication was never only about usefulness. It was also about trust. An animal had to tolerate human presence. A human had to tolerate animal unpredictability. Between fear and violence, there had to be a narrow opening, a moment where the wolf did not flee, where the human did not throw the spear, where the wildcat stepped closer to the granary, where the child looked into the eyes of a sick puppy and decided, somehow, to care. Domestication began in that dangerous little space between two species, and biology did the rest. In 1868, Charles Darwin published a massive work called The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication. Darwin was fascinated by pigeons, dogs, rabbits, cattle, pigs, and plants. He saw that humans could produce astonishing variation by selecting which individuals reproduced. But he also noticed something that remained mysterious for more than a century. Domesticated animals, even unrelated ones, often seem to change in similar ways. Dogs, pigs, sheep, goats, cattle, rabbits, and foxes can show some recurring traits. Smaller teeth, shorter faces, changes in coat color, floppy ears, curled tails, reduced fear, prolonged juvenile behavior, and sometimes smaller brains relative to body size. This pattern is often called domestication syndrome. Now we need to be careful. Modern scientists debate how universal this syndrome really is. Not every domesticated species shows every trait. Some famous examples are more complicated than older textbook stories suggested. The syndrome is not a magic checklist, but the pattern is real enough to raise a thrilling question. Why would selecting an animal for behavior change its face? Why would a calmer animal get floppy ears? Why would friendliness be connected to white patches of fur? For decades, this was one of the great biological riddles of domestication. And then, in the Soviet Union, a geneticist began an experiment so simple that it almost sounds like a fairy tale. But it was real. The year is 1959. We are in Novosibirsk, Siberia. The winters are brutal. The political atmosphere is dangerous. Soviet biology is still recovering from the damage caused by Trofim Lysenko, whose anti-genetic ideology ruined careers and lives. In that world, Dmitry Belayev and Lyudmila Trut begin one of the most famous experiments in evolutionary biology. Their subjects are silver foxes, not dogs, not wolves. Foxes. The rule is almost shockingly simple. Each generation, select the foxes that show the least fear and aggression toward humans. Breed only those. Do not select for looks. Do not select for floppy ears. Do not select for tail shape. Do not select for coat color. Select for tameness. That is it. And then watch evolution move. Within generations, some foxes begin behaving in ways that look almost dog-like. They seek human attention. They wag their tails. They whine. They lick handlers. They are not merely less aggressive. They are socially interested. And then the bodies begin to tell the same story. Some foxes develop floppy ears. Some show white patches of fur. Some have curled tails. Their reproductive cycles shift. Their stress hormone systems change. The foxes selected for calmness begin to look less like wild foxes, and more like the familiar animals humans have lived with for thousands of years. It is one of the most dramatic demonstrations of a principle that matters everywhere in domestication. Behavior can be an evolutionary gateway. Select for reduced fear, and you may unlock a cascade of changes. But what is the mechanism? How can a change in fear alter the shape of the skull or the pigment of the fur? The answer may begin in the embryo. In every vertebrate embryo, including yours, there is a temporary population of cells called neural crest cells. They are born early in development. Then they migrate. They move through the tiny developing body and help form an astonishing range of tissues. They help shape parts of the face and jaw. They contribute to cartilage and bone. They help form pigment cells. They are involved in parts of the peripheral nervous system. And crucially, they help form the adrenal medulla, part of the system that produces adrenaline and supports the fight or flight response. Now imagine that, generation after generation, humans prefer animals that panic less easily. Animals that do not explode into terror or violence when a person approaches. One hypothesis, the neural crest hypothesis, suggests that selection for tameness may favor animals with slightly altered neural crest development. Not broken development, not catastrophic development, just mild shifts. Fewer cells migrating or different timing or different levels of activity. If fewer neural crest cells contribute to the adrenal system, the animal may have a weaker stress response. It is less reactive, less fearful, easier to live beside. But those same neural crest cells also help shape the face, ears, jaws, and pigmentation. So the same developmental changes that soften fear can also soften the body. This is the thrilling idea. The floppy ear and the friendly temperament may be two visible edges of the same invisible process. Again, science is careful here. The neural crest hypothesis is powerful, but still debated. Domestication is not caused by one gene, one cell type, or one simple switch. It is polygenic, ecological, behavioral, and historical. But as a story of biology, it is breathtaking. The face of a dog may carry the memory of fear reduced. The spotted coat of a fox may be a fossil of selection acting on stress. The animal beside the hearth is not just trained. It is developmentally remade. And the first great animal to cross that threshold with us was not a cow or a goat or a horse. It was a predator. Let us go back before farms, back before pottery, back before wheat fields, sheep pens, city walls, kings, taxes, written laws, temples, and armies. We are in the late Pleistocene. Much of the world is colder than it is today. Across northern Eurasia stretches the mammoth steppe. Grasslands, tundra, wind, ice, and enormous animals. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, reindeer, horses, and following them are predators, wolves, cave lions, hyenas, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens. In this world, humans are not yet masters of nature. We are one dangerous primate among many dangerous hunters. We are clever, social, and technologically inventive, but we are vulnerable. A broken leg can be a death sentence. A failed hunt can mean starvation. A close encounter with a wounded mammoth can end a life in seconds. Then something extraordinary happens. Some wolves begin to tolerate human camps. Maybe they come for bones, scraps, or carcasses. Maybe the least fearful wolves linger at the edges of firelight. Maybe humans tolerate them because they clean waste, warn of danger, or help locate prey. No one sits down and invents the dog. Instead, a relationship begins. The exact timing and place of dog domestication remain among the great unsolved questions of prehistory. Genetic studies suggest dogs diverged from an extinct or unsampled wolf population, perhaps sometime tens of thousands of years ago. Archaeologically secure dog remains appear by roughly 15,000 to 14,000 years ago, and by 11,000 years ago, ancient DNA shows multiple dog lineages already spread across the world. That means the earliest chapter is missing. There's a ghost story here. A lost population of wolves, a vanished relationship, a partnership old enough that its first evidence has mostly disappeared. Some skulls from sites like Goyet in Belgium or the Altai region in Siberia look dog-like and are far older than the undisputed dog burials. But whether they are true ancestors of modern dogs, failed domestication attempts, or local wolf populations with dog-like features is still debated. This is one of the great mysteries. Were there several early attempts to live with wolves, most of which vanished in the chaos of the Ice Age? Did only one lineage survive to become the dog? Or did the boundary between wolf and dog blur for thousands of years before the relationship finally stabilized? We do not know. But we do know this. By the end of the Ice Age, humans and dogs were already bound together, and that bond may have changed human history. Anthropologist Pat Shipman has argued that early dogs or wolf dogs may have helped Homo sapiens become far more effective hunters than Neanderthals. This idea is fascinating, but it is not settled consensus. Neanderthal extinction involved climate shifts, small populations, competition, interbreeding, disease, and probably many interacting causes. Still, the hunting alliance hypothesis is powerful to imagine. Picture a Pleistocene hunt. The wolves have noses that read the world in invisible maps. They can track scent across distance. They can harass prey, tire it, corner it, keep it moving. Humans have hands, planning, language, fire, and projectile weapons. The wolf dog finds and holds the animal. The human kills at a distance. Then comes the strange arithmetic of meat. Humans crave fat. We need marrow, organs, and energy-rich tissues. A diet of only lean protein can become dangerous. Wolves, by contrast, can consume large quantities of lean meat. So the two predators may not have competed over every part of the carcass. They may have divided the kill in ways that made the partnership stable. The dog was not just a tool. The dog was a second sensory system. A warning alarm, a hunting partner, a heat source, a companion at the edge of sleep. And then in Germany, archaeologists found a burial that turns this from utility into something much more intimate. In 1914, workers quarrying basalt near Bonn, Germany, found a grave. It became known as the Bonn Oberkassel burial. Inside were two humans, an adult man and an adult woman. There were ornaments and traces of red ochre, the mineral pigment so often associated with Paleolithic ritual. And with them was a young dog, a puppy. The burial is about 14,200 years old. It is one of the earliest undisputed dog finds, and one of the earliest signs that humans were not merely using dogs, they were including them in the symbolic world of death. But the most moving part of the story came later, when researchers re-examined the puppy's remains. The animal had been terribly sick. Its teeth and bones show signs consistent with canine distemper infection. Distemper is a brutal viral disease. It can cause fever, respiratory illness, digestive distress, neurological problems, seizures, and severe weakness. For a young puppy, it is often fatal. The Bonn Oberkassel dog appears to have survived repeated bouts of illness over several weeks. Think about what that means. This was not a strong hunting dog providing obvious value to a mobile human group. This was a sick puppy. To survive, it likely needed warmth, protection, hydration, and food. It may have needed humans to clean it, feed it, carry it, and keep it alive through a period when it could not contribute to survival. 14,000 years ago, in a world without hospitals, without veterinary medicine, without surplus grain, without easy calories, people cared for a sick animal that could not help them hunt. That fact is almost overwhelming, because it tells us the relationship had crossed a boundary. The dog was not only useful, the dog was loved. And if you want to feel the deep mystery of prehistory, pause here. We do not know their names. We do not know what language they spoke. We do not know what songs they sang, what myths they told, or what they believed would happen after death. But in a grave in Germany 14,200 years ago, humans placed a puppy beside their dead. That is a message across time. It says, "This animal belonged with us." Dogs may have joined us at the campfire. Cats joined us at the granary. And the difference matters. Wolves are social hunters. They live in packs. They cooperate. They follow hierarchy. In some ways, they were pre-adapted to understand human social life. Wildcats are different. They are solitary, territorial predators. They do not naturally look at humans and think, "Wonderful, a pack leader." They do not want commands. They do not want a job description. They want prey, safety, and autonomy. So, cat domestication followed another path. As humans in the Fertile Crescent began harvesting and storing grain, they created an ecological miracle for rodents. Grain stores meant mice. Mice meant wildcats. The cats came because the food chain came. And humans very reasonably tolerated the small predators who protected the harvest. This is commensal domestication at its most elegant. The cat did not need to become obedient. It needed to become comfortable enough around humans to stay. For a long time, people thought cat domestication began in ancient Egypt about 4,000 years ago. Egypt certainly played a huge role. Cats appear in Egyptian art, religion, households, and ritual. They became associated with goddesses like Bastet. They were mummified in enormous numbers. Egypt helped turn the cat into a cultural phenomenon. But archaeology pushed the relationship deeper. On Cyprus, at the Neolithic site of Shilarokambos, archaeologists found a roughly 9,500-year-old burial. A human and a young cat placed near each other. Cyprus had no native wildcat population. That is the key. For a cat to be on Cyprus, humans had to bring it by boat. Let that sink in. Thousands of years before the pyramids, Neolithic people were carrying cats across the Mediterranean. Maybe for pest control. Maybe for companionship. Maybe both. But by then, the relationship had enough meaning that a cat could be placed near a human burial. Ancient DNA adds another layer. Modern domestic cats descend mainly from the Near Eastern or North African wildcat Felis libica. Studies suggest at least two major waves in the cat story. An early association with farming communities in the Near East, and a later, powerful Egyptian expansion of cats around the Mediterranean and beyond. And here's another important detail. Cats changed less than dogs. In many ways, a domestic cat is still close to a wild cat. Its body plan, hunting behavior, and independence remain intense. This is why the cat feels like a paradox. Domestic, but not conquered. The dog became our partner in action. The cat became our partner in place. Dogs helped humans move through the wild. Cats helped humans defend the stored future. And once humans had storage, everything changed. Because storage means property. Property means inheritance. Inheritance means inequality. And inequality grows teeth when animals enter the picture. Around 11,000 years ago, the Ice Age world gives way to the Holocene. The climate becomes warmer and more stable. Human populations grow. In several parts of the world, people begin domesticating plants and animals. In Southwest Asia, sheep and goats become central. But again, imagine the real process. It was not instant. No one wakes up one morning and says, "Today we begin the Neolithic Revolution." Instead, people hunt wild sheep and goats. Then they capture young animals. Then they keep them temporarily. Then they begin controlling births. Then they manage herds. Then the village itself changes shape because animals are now living inside the human world. One of the best places to see this slow transformation is Asikli Hoyuk in central Anatolia, in modern Turkey. This site gives archaeologists something rare, a long, high-resolution record of the transition from hunting to herding. In earlier layers, people seem to be capturing wild lambs and kids and keeping them for short periods before slaughter. Over centuries, the pattern changes. More animals are kept. Herd management intensifies. Eventually, sheep and goats become part of the sustained reproductive system under human control. One of the most remarkable lines of evidence comes from urine salts in the soil. That may not sound glamorous. It is not gold, not a temple, not a royal tomb. But it is archaeology at its most powerful. Animals penned in a settlement urinate. Over time, salts from that urine accumulate in the soil. By studying those deposits, researchers can estimate the scale of animal management across the site. The ground itself becomes a record of the herd. And as the animals enter the village changes. Architecture shifts. Space becomes more controlled. Dung piles up. Pens must be managed. Streets, houses, storage, and daily routines are reorganized around animals. This is the moment when domestication becomes civilization's infrastructure. The goat is no longer just an animal. It is a food system. The sheep is no longer just prey. It is a living bank account. The cow is no longer just meat. It is power on four legs, but the early herding economy still had a limit. If you want meat, you kill the animal. That is a one-time payout. Then humans discovered a more revolutionary idea. What if the animal could be more valuable alive? Archaeologist Andrew Sherratt called it the secondary products revolution. The phrase sounds academic, but the idea is explosive. Primary products are what you get by killing an animal: meat, hide, bone, marrow. Secondary products are what you get while the animal lives: milk, wool, traction, manure, transport. This changed everything. A goat can produce milk again and again. A sheep can produce wool again and again. A bullock can pull a plow. A donkey can carry goods. A horse can move a rider across distances that once took days or weeks on foot. With secondary products, animals become renewable engines of wealth. Think of milk. For many mammals, including many humans, the ability to digest lactose declines after childhood. But in some human populations, especially those with long histories of dairying genetic changes allowed adults to keep producing lactase, the enzyme needed to digest milk sugar. This is gene culture coevolution. Humans create a dairying culture. That culture rewards bodies that can digest milk. Over generations, lactase persistence spreads. The animal changes human behavior. Human behavior changes human gene. Now think of wool. Wool is not just warmth. It is textiles, trade, labor specialization, storage, and status. It turns sheep into walking fiber factories. Now think of traction. This may be one of the most important and underrated forces in ancient history. A human with a digging stick or hoe can cultivate only so much land. A farmer with oxen and a plow can cultivate far more. That means more surplus. More surplus means more population. More population means more hierarchy, more storage, more administration, more conflict, and eventually more states. Domesticated animals did not just feed civilization. They increased the scale at which inequality could operate. It is easy to romanticize the Neolithic. Fields of grain, villages, sheep bells, hearth smoke, people settling down after the long wandering of the Ice Age. But the agricultural revolution was not a simple upgrade. It was a bargain. Humans gained food production, storage, and population growth. But they also gained harder labor, narrower diets, disease, hierarchy, and new forms of dependence. Large domestic animals made that bargain even more intense. A major study of wealth inequality across ancient societies found that inequality rose after agriculture, but it rose especially sharply in Eurasia compared with North America and Mesoamerica. One proposed reason is the availability of large domesticable mammals in the Old World. In places with oxen, cattle, horses, and other large animals, families could expand production far beyond what human labor alone allowed. Animal traction made land more valuable and more scalable. If one household controlled more animals and land, its advantage could compound across generations. In simpler terms, animals made wealth bigger. And because animals reproduce, wealth could reproduce too. Herds could grow, land could expand, status could harden, power could be inherited. This does not mean animals single-handedly invented inequality. Human societies are too complex for that. But large domestic animals became powerful multipliers. They also changed gender systems. Many scholars argue that plow agriculture and livestock wealth helped intensify patriarchal structures in parts of the Old World. Heavy plowing with large animals often became associated with male labor. Herd ownership, bride wealth, inheritance, and warfare could tie livestock to male status and lineage. Again, this was not the same everywhere. Human societies varied enormously. But the broad pattern is hard to ignore. Once animals became capital, control over animals became social power. Then came the biological cost. Disease. When humans live packed together with cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, ducks, chickens, dogs, cats, rats, and stored grain, they create a new ecological world for pathogens. A village is not just a social invention. It is a microbial experiment. Many major human diseases have animal connections. The CDC estimates that more than 6 out of 10 known infectious diseases in people can spread from animals, and 3 out of 4 new or emerging infectious diseases come from animals. Measles appears to have diverged from a rinderpest-like cattle virus, with newer research pushing that divergence potentially as early as the 6th century BCE, in a world of growing cities and trade networks. Influenza viruses circulate through birds, pigs, humans, and other hosts. Other parasites and bacteria move through the tight circuits of farm, household waste, water, and animal flesh. Domestication helped humans escape some forms of scarcity, but it opened the gates to epidemic life. This is the shadow behind the barn door. The same animals that pulled the plow also pulled pathogens into human history. Now the story begins to move, because some animals did not merely feed us or clothe us, they collapsed distance. The donkey is easy to underestimate today. It seems humble, stubborn, ordinary. But in ancient history, the donkey was revolutionary. Domestic donkeys descend from African wild asses, with strong evidence for roots in northeastern Africa. Earlier genetic work suggested domestication around 5,000 years ago, and more recent genomic work pushes deep donkey management in Africa even further back. Why does this matter? Because the donkey is a desert machine. As parts of the Sahara and surrounding regions became drier, humans needed an animal that could carry loads across harsh, water-scarce landscapes. Donkeys are tough, efficient, and sure-footed. They made overland trade more reliable. They linked communities. They moved food, metal, textiles, luxury goods, and information. Before the horse became a symbol of aristocratic speed, the donkey was already doing the slow, essential work of civilization. A donkey caravan may not look dramatic at first, but listen to it. Hooves on dry ground, cloth bundles shifting, traders speaking across languages, copper, grain, incense, wine, and stories moving from one world into another. The donkey did not conquer the world with speed. It connected the world with endurance. Then there is the horse. No animal, except perhaps the dog, occupies such a charged place in human imagination. The horse's speed made flesh. It is distance shortened. It is the warrior elite, the messenger, the chariot, the cavalry charge, the steppe horizon. But horse domestication is more complicated than older stories suggested. For a long time, the Batai culture of Kazakhstan, around the 4th millennium BCE, was seen as a likely early center of horse domestication. Archaeologists found evidence suggesting horse corralling, possible milking, and bit wear. But ancient DNA changed the picture. The Batai horses appear closely related to Przewalski's horses, not to the main lineage of modern domestic horses. So Batai may represent an early, important, but ultimately separate horse-human relationship. The lineage that gave rise to most modern domestic horses appears to have expanded rapidly from the western Eurasian steppes, especially the lower Volga-Don region, around 4,200 years ago. Once that happened, the spread was explosive. Why? Because a rideable, manageable horse changes the map. A person on foot lives in one scale of geography. A person with a horse lives in another. Messages travel faster. Herds move farther. Trade routes stretch. Raids become harder to predict. Military power becomes mobile. Elites can project force across landscapes that once protected local communities. Then come chariots. Then cavalry. Then empires. The horse does not create conquest by itself. Humans do that. But the horse gives conquest legs. And across the Bronze Age and Iron Age, those legs reshape Eurasia. Languages spread. Trade routes intensify. Pastoral nomads become world historical forces. The horse turns grass into mobility, and mobility into power. If the horse conquered the steppe, the camel conquered the desert. That sentence is not poetic exaggeration. Before camels were fully integrated into transport systems, deserts were barriers. After camels, deserts became corridors. Dromedaries, the one-humped camels of Arabia and North Africa, and Bactrian camels, the two-humped camels of Central Asia, possess biological adaptations that seem almost unreal. They can endure dehydration that would kill many mammals. They can tolerate dramatic shifts in body temperature. They can conserve water with extraordinary efficiency. And at the cellular level, their red blood cells are unusual. Unlike the round red blood cells of most mammals, camel red blood cells are oval. This shape helps them continue flowing when the blood thickens during dehydration, and it helps them survive sudden rehydration when the camel drinks large quantities of water. In practical terms, this biology transformed geography. Camels opened trans-Saharan trade. They helped move incense, spices, textiles, salt, gold, ivory, and ideas across regions that had once been almost impossible to cross at scale. A camel caravan is not just transport. It is an ecological hack. Humans borrowed the camel's desert body and used it to stitch together worlds. The desert did not become easy. It became negotiable. And with that negotiation came wealth, religion, empire, and exchange. Once again, an animal did not simply serve civilization. It changed what civilization could be. At this point, a beginner might ask a very good question. If domestication is so powerful, why did humans not domesticate everything? Why not zebras? Why not deer? Why not every big animal that looked useful? The answer is that domestication requires a rare combination of traits. An animal must tolerate humans. It must breed reasonably well under human control. It must have a social structure or behavior pattern that humans can exploit. It must not panic itself to death in confinement. It must grow at a useful rate. It must provide something worth the cost of managing it. Many animals fail one or more of these tests. Zebras, for example, are not just striped horses waiting for a saddle. They evolved under intense predation pressure in Africa and can be aggressive, reactive, and difficult to manage at scale. Deer can be skittish and challenging in captivity. Many large mammals are too slow to reproduce, too dangerous, too territorial, or too stress-prone. This is important because it breaks the illusion of total human mastery. Humans did not simply impose domestication on nature. We negotiated with the behavioral ecology of each species. Some animals stepped into the human niche. Some could be pulled into it. Some resisted. And some changed us more than we changed them. Which brings us to the strangest domestication story of all. Ours. Look at a modern human skull beside a Neanderthal skull. The Neanderthal face is powerful. Large brow ridges, projecting mid-face, robust bones, large nose, strong body. Neanderthals were not stupid brutes. That old stereotype is wrong. They made tools, used fire, cared for injured individuals, hunted large animals, and may have had symbolic culture. But anatomically, they were different from us. Modern Homo sapiens tend to have flatter faces, smaller teeth, reduced brow ridges, more gracile skeletons, and compared with some earlier humans, a different balance of skull and face. Some researchers have noticed that these changes resemble aspects of domestication syndrome in animals. Reduced facial projection, smaller teeth, reduced reactive aggression, greater social tolerance, juvenile-like traits retained into adulthood. This is the human self-domestication hypothesis. The idea is not that another species domesticated us. The idea is that humans created social environments that selected against uncontrolled reactive aggression. Imagine a small hunter-gatherer group. Cooperation is everything. Food sharing matters. Trust matters. Teaching matters. Childcare matters. Planning matters. Planning matters. If one violently reactive individual constantly threatens group survival, the group may use gossip, exclusion, coalition, punishment, or execution to control him. Over many generations, social life could favor individuals who are less explosively aggressive and more capable of cooperation. In other words, humans may have used social pressure to tame humans. This is a fascinating hypothesis, not a closed case. Human evolution is too complex to reduce to one mechanism, but genetic research has made the idea harder to ignore. One gene network often discussed here involves basaneb, a gene linked to neural crest cell regulation and to the Williams syndrome region of chromosome 7. Williams syndrome is associated with distinctive facial features and unusually social behavior, though it is a medical condition and should not be oversimplified. Researchers comparing modern humans and archaic humans have suggested that changes in networks involving basaneb may have contributed to the modern human face and aspects of self-domestication. If that is right, then the same broad developmental themes that help explain animal domestication may also illuminate our own evolution. The idea is almost dizzying. The dog by the fire, the fox in the Siberian experiment, the pig in the village, and the human telling stories under the stars may all be connected by deep biological patterns linking stress, face, development, and social life. We became the animal that could live with wolves. We became the animal that could manage herds. We became the animal that could build cities. But to do that, perhaps we first had to become the animal that could tolerate each other. Now step back and see the whole picture. Domestication is not a simple human triumph. It is a great exchange. The dog gave us scent, warning, partnership, and companionship. We gave the dog food, shelter, and a new evolutionary path. The cat gave us pest control and mystery. We gave the cat ships, cities, and global expansion. The sheep gave wool, milk, meat, and manure. We gave the sheep protection, reproduction, and dependence. The cow gave muscle, dairy, hide, and status. We gave the cow a world remade around pasture, barns, fences, and breeding. The donkey gave endurance. The horse gave speed. The camel gave desert passage. And all of them gave us consequences. Some consequences were beautiful. A child sleeping beside a dog. A village surviving winter because goats turned rough vegetation into milk. A caravan carrying stories between distant peoples. A horse carrying a message faster than feet ever could. Some consequences were terrible. Wealth inequality, hard labor, crowded settlements, zoonotic disease, animals suffering, warfare made faster and farther reaching. Domestication is not innocent. It is not evil either. It is one of the most powerful forms of relationship life has ever invented. And once you see it, the modern world looks different. The milk in a refrigerator is a fossil of ancient goat and cattle management. The dog on a sofa carries the shadow of Ice Age wolves. The cat in a window is the descendant of grain stores, ships, temples, and rodents. The word capital itself comes from the Latin caput, meaning head, as in head of cattle. Wealth once literally had a heartbeat. Our cities, economies, diets, diseases, and emotions are full of animals. We did not leave the wild behind. We brought pieces of it inside the walls, and then those pieces remade the walls. So return to the beginning. A leafcutter ant carries a fragment of green into the dark. A beetle bores into an alcohol-rich tree and cultivates fungus in the walls. A wolf stands at the edge of a human camp, watching firelight. A sick puppy survives because someone, 14,000 years ago, decided it was worth caring for. A wildcat steps into a village because the mice are there. A goat bleats inside a pen at a sickly hoyuk, and the soil beneath it quietly records the birth of herding. An ox leans into a plow. A donkey caravan crosses dry land. A horse turns distance into strategy. A camel turns desert into road. And a human child looks into an animal's eyes and feels that strange mammalian recognition. You are not me, but you are not nothing. That may be the emotional core of domestication. It begins with practical needs: food, safety, transport, labor. But it becomes something much larger. It becomes co-evolution. It becomes culture. It becomes memory. It becomes the shape of the human story. The greatest mystery is not that humans changed animals. The greatest mystery is that animals changed what it meant to be human. And somewhere in that long exchange, from wolf to dog, from wild goat to herd, from horse to empire, from neural crest cell to human face, the boundary between nature and civilization begins to dissolve. Because civilization was never separate from nature. Civilization was built out of relationships with nature. Some of those relationships had hooves. Some had paws. Some had claws. Some had wings. And one of them had hands, language, fire, and the dangerous imagination to believe it could master the world. But the world was never simply mastered. It answered back. Through genes. Through disease. Through love. Through love. Through the animal bodies that carried us into history. Domestication is not the story of humans conquering the wild. It is the story of the wild moving in, sitting by the fire, and changing us forever. If you enjoyed this journey, look at the animal nearest to you. A dog, a cat, a bird outside the window, even the milk in your tea. And remember, you are looking at the living aftermath of one of the greatest revolutions in the history of life. Not a revolution written first in kings and battles, but in bones, teeth, genomes, graves, milk, wool, hoof prints, and the quiet decision, made again and again across thousands of years, stay near.